I'm Victoria, 31, and I stood completely alone at my baby boy Nathan's funeral while my parents were busy helping my sister Melissa pick out wedding dresses. My son was only 4 months old when a rare heart condition took him from us. As I watched his tiny blue casket being lowered into the frozen ground that February morning, my mother's words kept echoing in my mind. Babies die all the time, Victoria. Melissa's wedding is once in a lifetime. That day, something inside me died along with my son. Before I tell you how I made them face the consequences of their unforgivable choice, let me know in the comments where you're watching from. This story about ultimate family betrayal might change how you view loyalty forever. Growing up in our house, there was never any question about who mattered most. Melissa, now 28, had been the princess from the moment she took her first breath. Our parents, Carol and David, both 55, built their entire world around her needs, her wants, her dreams. I learned early that my role was to be the responsible one, the backup plan, the child who didn't require attention because Melissa demanded all of it. When Melissa failed her driving test 3 times, our parents hired a private instructor and bought her a brand new car to practice with. When I passed mine on the first try at 16, they handed me the keys to our old minivan and said, "Good job," before immediately asking if I could drive Melissa to her dance lessons. This pattern defined our childhood. Melissa's C- report cards were celebrated with dinner at her favorite restaurant because she tried her best. My straight A's were met with, "We expect nothing less from you, Victoria," before the conversation immediately shifted back to whatever crisis Melissa was facing that week. By the time I graduated high school as valedictorian, I had stopped expecting my parents to show pride in my accomplishments. The scholarship to nursing school was something I celebrated alone in my room while downstairs my parents planned an elaborate Sweet 16 party for Melissa, complete with a DJ and catered dinner. When I tried to mention my achievement at dinner, my mother waved me off saying, "That's wonderful, dear, but right now we need to focus on Melissa's party. She's only 16 once." College provided my first real escape from the suffocating dynamics of home. At nursing school, I excelled not because I had to, but because I genuinely loved helping people. My professors noticed my dedication, my classmates respected my knowledge, and for the first time in my life, I felt valued for who I was rather than dismissed for who I was. And single quotes T.it was during my junior year that I met James at a campus coffee shop. He was studying engineering, quiet and thoughtful, with kind eyes that actually listened when I spoke. What struck me most about James was how his family treated each other. When I first visited his home for dinner, I was amazed to see his parents ask each of their 3 children about their day with genuine interest. No one was competing for attention. No one was dismissed. Everyone mattered equally. "Your family is so normal," I told James that night as we walked around his neighborhood. He laughed. "Normal? They're pretty boring actually." "No," I said seriously. "They're perfect." James and I married 2 years after graduation. I was 26, working as a pediatric nurse at the Children's Hospital, and he had landed a job with a respected engineering firm. We bought a small house about an hour from both sets of parents, though the distance from mine was intentional. I needed space to build a life where I wasn't constantly reminded of my second-class status. When we announced our pregnancy, the contrast between our family's reactions was stark. James's parents immediately started planning visits, asking about baby names, and offering to help with anything we needed. My parents' response was lukewarm at best. "Oh, that's nice, Victoria," my mother said when I called with the news. "Did we mention Melissa got promoted to assistant manager at the boutique?" Even my pregnancy couldn't compete with Melissa's minor career developments. Throughout my pregnancy, James's family was incredibly involved. His mother came to every doctor's appointment I'd allow, helped me set up the nursery, and bought countless baby books that we read together. My parents visited exactly once during those 9 months, and only because they were in the area for one of Melissa's work events. They stayed for 20 minutes, made polite conversation about my due date, and left when Melissa called needing a ride home. Nathan was born on a cold January morning after 18 hours of labor. He was perfect 10 fingers, 10 toes, James's dark hair, and my green eyes. The first time I held him, I understood love in a way I never had before. It was fierce and protective and all-consuming. James cried when Nathan wrapped his tiny fingers around his thumb. We were completely, utterly in love with our son. James's parents arrived at the hospital within 2 hours of Nathan's birth, bearing flowers, balloons, and so much joy it filled the room. They held Nathan with reverence, took hundreds of photos, and kept telling us what a beautiful family we were. My parents came the following day, stayed for exactly 30 minutes, and left because my mother had a hair appointment she couldn't reschedule. They held Nathan awkwardly, as if they weren't sure what to do with him, and seemed relieved when he started fussing and I took him back. Nathan was an easy baby. He slept well, ate well, and rarely cried. He had the most beautiful smile that could light up any room. James and I fell into the rhythm of new parenthood with surprising ease. James would get up for the night feedings so I could rest before my shifts at the hospital. I would sing to Nathan while changing his diapers, and he would coo and gurgle. As if he was trying to sing along, James's parents visited weekly, sometimes just to give us a break so we could shower or grab dinner together. They created a photo album specifically for Nathan's pictures and constantly told us how lucky they felt to be his grandparents. My parents visited twice in Nathan's first 4 months of life. Both times, they seemed uncomfortable and eager to leave. When Nathan would cry, they would immediately hand him back to me as if his tears were somehow my failure as a mother. Despite their obvious disinterest, I sent my parents weekly photos of Nathan's milestones. His first smile at 6 weeks, the way he had started tracking objects with his eyes, how he loved bath time and would splash happily in his little tub. My mother would occasionally respond with a heart emoji. My father never responded at all. 3 months before Nathan died, Melissa announced her engagement to Derek, a financial advisor she'd been dating for 10 months. My parents were over the moon. They immediately began planning an elaborate engagement party and started discussing wedding venues before Melissa had even picked a date. My mother called me daily with updates about party planning, guest lists, and venue options. The engagement party was scheduled for the same weekend as Nathan's baptism, a ceremony we had planned months in advance and that my parents had promised to attend. When I reminded my mother about the conflict, she sighed heavily. "Oh, Victoria, we'll have to miss the baby thing. Melissa's engagement party is so important. You understand, don't you? Baptisms happen all the time, but this is Melissa's moment." I wanted to scream that Nathan's baptism was important too, that it was a once-in-a-lifetime event for our family, but I swallowed the words. I had learned long ago that arguing with my parents about their priorities was pointless. Melissa would always come first. 2 weeks before Nathan died, he developed what seemed like a minor cold, just a slight cough and some congestion. I took him to his pediatrician, Dr. Martinez, who examined him thoroughly and assured me it was a common viral infection that would clear up on its own. "New parent anxiety," she said kindly. "Completely normal. He's perfectly healthy, but something felt off to me." Nathan wasn't eating as well as usual, and he seemed more tired than normal. I took a few days off work to monitor him closely. By the weekend, he seemed better, smiling and cooing when I sang to him. I thought we were in the clear. It was a Monday night when our world shattered completely. Nathan had seemed fine that day, eating normally, taking his usual naps, playing with the mobile above his changing table. James and I had put him down for the night around 7:30 after his evening bottle. He had fallen asleep easily in my arms, and I had held him for an extra few minutes, breathing in that sweet baby smell and feeling grateful for our perfect little family. We had dinner, watched an episode of our favorite show, and went to bed. Around 10, the baby monitor was quiet all night, which wasn't unusual. Nathan had been sleeping through the night for several weeks. When I woke at 5:30 from my early shift at the hospital, I realized Nathan hadn't woken for his usual dawn feeding. A chill of worry ran down my spine. I walked quickly to his nursery, the room we had painted light blue with clouds on the ceiling. Nathan lay in his crib, surrounded by the stuffed animals James's parents had bought him. But something was wrong. He was too still to quiet. "Nathan?" I whispered, reaching down to touch his cheek. It was cold. What happened next exists in my memory as scattered, horrible fragments. My screams bringing James running, his hands shaking as he tried to perform CPR on Nathan's tiny body. My trembling fingers calling 911. The dispatcher's calm voice asking questions I could barely understand through my sobs. The paramedics arriving and taking over resuscitation efforts that I knew in my heart were futile. The terrible ambulance ride with Nathan's lifeless body. The emergency room with its harsh fluorescent lights. Dr. Chen, the pediatric cardiologist, delivering the words that destroyed our world. "I'm so sorry. Your son passed away from what appears to be a congenital heart defect that went undiagnosed. Sometimes these conditions don't present any symptoms until it's too late." There was nothing you could have done. James collapsed into a chair, sobbing. I stood frozen, unable to process what I was hearing. This couldn't be real. We had done everything right. Nathan had been healthy. This wasn't supposed to happen to us. We spent hours holding Nathan, memorizing every detail of his face, kissing his hands, telling him how much we loved him. The hospital staff was incredibly kind, giving us as much time as we needed. A grief counselor spoke with us. The chaplain offered prayers. Someone mentioned funeral arrangements, but the words felt meaningless. Eventually, I realized I needed to call my parents. With shaking hands, I dialed my mother's number. "Mom," I said when she answered, my voice breaking. "Nathan died last night. Heart defect. We're at the hospital." There was a pause. "Oh, Victoria, that's awful," she said, but her tone was flat, almost inconvenienced. No gasp of shock, no immediate offer to come to the hospital, no maternal instinct to comfort her devastated daughter. "We need to plan a funeral," I continued, desperate for her to understand the magnitude of what had happened. "Yes, I suppose you do. Let us know the details when you have them." That was it. No questions about how we were coping, no offers to help with arrangements, no acknowledgement of their grandson's death beyond basic politeness. James's parents, in contrast, were already in their car driving to the hospital, having dropped everything. The moment we called, the next few days were a nightmare of decisions and paperwork. James and I moved through our house like zombies, unable to eat, unable to sleep, unable to accept that Nathan was gone. His crib still had his blanket folded at the foot. His bottles were still in the sterilizer. His toys were scattered around the living room where we had been playing with him just days before. James's parents handled all the practical arrangements, contacting the funeral home, choosing flowers, arranging for food after the service. They were devastated but functional, providing the support we desperately needed. My parents called once to ask when the funeral would be. "Friday at 10 in the morning, I told my mother. "At Sacred Heart Cemetery." "Friday," she repeated. "Oh dear. That's the day Melissa and I plan to go wedding dress shopping in the city. We have appointments at 3 different boutiques." I thought I had misheard her. "Mom, this is Nathan's funeral. Your grandson's funeral." "I understand that, Victoria, but we've had these appointments scheduled for weeks. Melissa's been looking forward to this for so long. Wedding dress shopping is such a special mother-daughter experience. You understand, don't you?" I didn't understand. I couldn't comprehend how my parents could choose dress shopping over their grandson's funeral. "No, Mom, I don't understand. Please explain it to me," she sighed, clearly annoyed. "Victoria, I know you're upset, but think practically. Babies die all the time. It's tragic, but it happens. Melissa's wedding is once in a lifetime. She needs me there for the dress shopping. It's one of the most important days in her life. The words hit me like physical blows. Babies die all the time. Melissa's wedding is once in a lifetime. My son's death was just a statistic to her, while my sister's dress shopping was a sacred milestone. I see, was all I could manage before. Hanging up, James found me sitting on our bedroom floor, still holding the phone. When I told him what my mother had said, his face went white with rage. She didn't just say that, he whispered. She did. I'm calling them back, he said, reaching for his phone. I'm going to tell them exactly what kind of people they are. I stopped him. Don't. It won't change anything. This is who they've always been. I just never wanted to see it clearly. The morning of Nathan's funeral was gray and drizzly, the kind of February day that chills you to the bone. I stood in front of my closet, staring at the black dress I had bought the day before, trying to comprehend that I was choosing clothes to wear to my baby's funeral. How was this my life? As we drove to the cemetery, I checked my phone one last time, hoping against hope that my parents had changed their minds. Instead, there was a text from Melissa. Sorry about the baby. Mom and I are so excited about dress shopping today. Can't wait to find the dress. I turned off my phone and didn't turn it back on for the rest of the day. Nathan's casket was heartbreakingly small, white with gold handles, adorned with white roses and baby's breath. It looked like it should hold a doll, not my child. The cemetery had a special section for infants called Angel's Garden, surrounded by tiny headstones and grieving parents who understood our pain. Standing beside Nathan's casket, I felt completely disconnected from reality. James stood next to me, his hand gripping mine so tightly it hurt, his face pale and drawn. His parents were on our other side, his mother crying softly, his father's arm around her shoulders. Around us gathered friends, colleagues, neighbors, and several families from the pediatric ward where I worked. My best friend Rachel had flown in from California. My college roommate Sophie was there with her husband. The glaring absence of my parents and sister was impossible to ignore. People kept asking where my family was, and James's mother smoothly deflected with vague comments about illness while shooting me worried glances. Pastor Williams spoke beautifully about Nathan's brief but meaningful life. Some souls, he said, complete their purpose on earth quickly. In 4 short months, Nathan brought immeasurable joy and love to Victoria and James. His impact on their lives will last forever. During the service, I felt my phone vibrate in my purse. I ignored it until after the final prayer, when I checked to see Instagram notifications. Melissa had posted stories from their dress shopping trip, photos of my mother holding up potential wedding dresses, both of them smiling and laughing, celebrating while their grandson and brother was being buried 20 miles away. The burial was the hardest part. Watching that tiny casket being lowered into the frozen ground made Nathan's death final in a way nothing else had. This was it. This was forever. My baby was gone, and I would never hold him again, never see him grow up, never know what kind of man he would have become. James's father had to support him as we threw the first handfuls of dirt onto the casket. James's mother held me as I followed suit, my entire body shaking with grief so profound I thought it might kill me. Around us, others took their turns, whispering prayers and goodbyes to a little boy who would never hear them. After the burial, people gathered at our house with food and flowers and words that couldn't touch our pain. I moved through the rooms, mechanically accepting condolences, thanking people for coming, declining offers of food I knew I couldn't eat. In quiet moments, I found myself listening for Nathan's cries, only to remember with fresh agony that I would never hear them again. After everyone left, James and I sat in Nathan's nursery, surrounded by his things. The crib where he had slept peacefully every night, the changing table with diapers still neatly stacked, the rocking chair where I had nursed him and sung lullabies. We couldn't bring ourselves to change anything, as if preserving his room might somehow preserve a piece of him. The first week after the funeral passed in a haze of unbearable grief. I took indefinite leave from work, James tried to return after 3 days but came home early, unable to concentrate. We barely ate, barely slept, barely spoke. The silence in our house was deafening. Nathan's absence was everywhere, in the bottles we no longer needed to prepare, the diapers we no longer changed, the lullabies we no longer sang. James's parents came daily, bringing food, doing laundry, sitting with us in our grief. They never tried to minimize our pain or rush us through it. They just loved us and supported us however they could. My parents didn't call, didn't text, didn't visit. For an entire week, they acted as if Nathan had never existed, as if their grandson hadn't just been buried, as if their daughter wasn't drowning in grief. Finally, 7 days after the funeral, my phone rang with my mother's number. I almost didn't answer, but curiosity got the better of me. "Victoria, how are you?" she asked casually, as if we had simply gone a week without talking. "My son died and was buried without his grandparents there," I replied flatly. "How do you think I am now, Victoria?" There's no need for that tone. "We're calling to invite you and James to Sunday dinner. It would be good for you to get out of the house. Melissa wants to show you photos from her dress shopping trip. She found the most beautiful gown." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. My mother wanted me to come to dinner to look at wedding dress photos while I was still reeling from burying my child. "I don't think we'll be able to make it," I said. "Victoria, you can't just shut yourself away. Life goes on. It's been a week already. You need to start moving forward." A week. As if a week was sufficient time to recover from losing your child. "I have to go," I said and hung up. James found me sitting on the bathroom floor, staring at nothing. When I told him about the call, about my mother's suggestion that I look at Melissa's wedding dress photos, his expression darkened with a rage I had never seen before. "They want you to look at wedding dress photos," he said slowly. "The same dress shopping trip they chose over Nathan's funeral." "Yes, they're not human," he said. "There's something fundamentally broken in people who could do that." Against every instinct I had, I agreed to attend Sunday dinner at my parents' house 2 weeks after Nathan's funeral. James was reluctant, but I felt compelled to see my parents face to face, to understand how they could act as if nothing significant had happened. We drove to the suburban house where I had grown up, the house with the perfect lawn and the living room that was always kept magazine ready. My mother greeted us at the door with air kisses, careful not to smudge her lipstick. "Victoria, James, come in. Dinner's almost ready. Melissa's here with Derek. She's so excited to show you her dress photos." No mention of Nathan, no acknowledgement of our loss, no recognition that we might not be in the mood to celebrate wedding preparations. We sat stiffly in the living room while Melissa dominated the conversation with details about her dress shopping experience, the different designers they had considered, the accessories she was planning. My parents hung on every word, offering opinions and suggestions. I noticed new photos on the mantel, Melissa in various wedding dresses, my mother beaming beside her. During dinner, the conversation revolved entirely around wedding plans. The venue, the caterer, the flowers, the honeymoon destination. Every topic except the grandson who had died 2 weeks earlier. Finally, I couldn't take it anymore. "Did Nathan's funeral interfere with your dress shopping?" I asked, my voice cutting through a discussion about wedding flowers. The table fell silent. My mother's smile froze. "Victoria," she said with a nervous laugh, "let's not discuss unpleasant topics during dinner." "Unpleasant topics?" I repeated. "You mean my son's death? Your grandson's funeral that you skipped?" My father cleared his throat. "Victoria, what's done is done. No point dwelling on the past." "The past? It was 2 weeks ago." Melissa rolled her eyes. "This is exactly why we didn't want to bring it up. You always make everything so dramatic." "Victoria," I stared at her in disbelief. "Dramatic? My baby died, Melissa. And none of you came to his funeral because you were too busy shopping for wedding dresses." "It wasn't just shopping," my mother said defensively. "It was a special mother-daughter experience. We'd been planning it for weeks, but you could miss your grandson's funeral." James, who had been silent until now, put down his fork with a clatter. "I've been sitting here trying to be respectful, but this is beyond comprehension. Do you have any idea what Victoria has been through?" "What we've been through?" My mother looked offended. "Of course we do. We're very sorry for your loss. But life must go on, mustn't it? Dwelling in grief isn't healthy." "It's been 2 weeks," James said, his voice dangerously quiet. 2 weeks since we buried our son, and you haven't once asked how we're doing. You haven't offered to help. You haven't acknowledged our pain in any way. We thought it best to give you space," my father said. I laughed bitterly. "Space? Is that what you call it? Because from where I'm sitting, it looks like indifference. It looks like you care more about wedding dress shopping than your grandson's death." "That's not fair, Victoria," Melissa said. "Mom had already committed to going with me. She couldn't be in 2 places at once. She made a choice, Melissa, and she chose you, as she always has." A heavy silence fell over the table. Derek looked uncomfortable, studying his plate intently. "Actually," my mother said finally, "several people asked where we were during the funeral. We told them your father was having back problems and I needed to stay home to care for him." The revelation hit me like a physical blow. They had lied to the family about why they missed Nathan's funeral. They were ashamed enough to lie, but not ashamed enough to actually attend. "You lied," I whispered. "Well, we could hardly tell them we were dress shopping, could we?" My mother replied, as if this were perfectly reasonable. "People wouldn't understand." "I don't understand," I said, standing up. "And I never will." James and I left without finishing our meal. In the car, he held my hand as I sobbed, the full weight of my family's betrayal finally sinking in. Over the next month, James and I began seeing a grief counselor who specialized in infant loss. Dr. Roberts helped us process not only Nathan's death but also the additional trauma of my family's response. During one session, she asked about our support systems. "James's family has been incredible," I said. "Mine has been absent." When I explained what had happened, Dr. Roberts' professional composure slipped momentarily before she regained control. "That sounds incredibly painful," she said carefully. "Have you always felt that your parents favored your sister?" This opened a floodgate of memories and emotions I had been suppressing for years. Session after session, I unpacked a lifetime of being treated as secondary to Melissa. The birthday parties that were scaled down because Melissa's events were more important. The achievements that were dismissed because they overshadowed Melissa's struggles. The constant message that my needs, my feelings, my very existence mattered less than hers. Dr. Roberts introduced concepts like narcissistic family dynamics and scapegoating. She helped me understand that what had happened at Nathan's funeral wasn't an isolated incident, it was the culmination of a lifetime pattern of being devalued. "What do you want to do with this understanding?" Dr. Roberts asked during our 8th session. "I want them to understand what they've done," I said. "Not just to me, but to Nathan. He deserved grandparents who valued his life, who would have moved heaven and earth to honor his death. And if they can't or won't acknowledge it, then I'll know where I stand, and I'll protect myself accordingly." That night, I told James about my decision. "I need to confront them. I need them to face what they've done." James looked worried. "What are you planning?" "Nothing destructive, just the truth. The truth they've been avoiding." "I'm concerned about you," he admitted. "Confronting them might make things worse." "Worse than losing our son and being told it doesn't matter? Worse than standing alone at his funeral because dress shopping was more important?" "I don't think that's possible." He held me close. "Whatever you decide, I'm with you." I spent the next 2 weeks preparing. I gathered evidence of the pattern that had led to their absence at Nathan's funeral: photos, text messages, voicemails that documented years of prioritizing Melissa over me. I reached out to extended family members who had attended Nathan's funeral and noticed my parents' absence. Most had believed the lies about my father's back problems, but when I gently questioned them, doubt began to creep in. I did think it was strange. my Aunt Linda admitted during a phone call. Even with back problems, you'd think they could make it for at least part of the service. What if they weren't dealing with back problems at all? I asked quietly. What if they were dress shopping with Melissa instead? The silence that followed told me everything I needed to know. Similar conversations with other relatives revealed that while my parents had fooled some people, others had found their excuse suspicious. The foundation of their lies was cracking. Finally, I was ready. I texted my parents. I'd like to meet with you this Sunday at p.m. to discuss moving forward. Just the three of us, my mother replied immediately. Wonderful. I'm so glad you're ready to put this behind us. I'll make your favorite chocolate cake. Her response, assuming I wanted to put this behind us without any acknowledgement or accountability, only strengthened my resolve. The day of the confrontation, I dressed carefully in Nathan's favorite outfit that I had worn while feeding him a soft green sweater that brought out my eyes. I carried a folder with my documentation and a framed photo of Nathan from his last week of life, where he was smiling his beautiful, gummy smile. My parents' house looked exactly as it always had, perfect, pristine, and cold. My mother answered the door wearing a floral dress and pearls, as if this were a social visit rather than a reckoning. Victoria, come in. The cake is cooling on the counter. My father sat in his usual chair, newspaper folded beside him. He stood when I entered, giving me an awkward pat on the shoulder, the closest he ever came to physical affection. Good to see you, Victoria. You look well. I didn't look well. I had lost 15 pounds, had dark circles under my eyes, and my skin was pale from weeks of barely leaving the house. But my appearance had never been of particular interest to my father unless it reflected poorly on him. Let's have some cake first, my mother suggested, already heading toward the kitchen. Actually, I said, my voice steadier than I expected, I'd prefer to talk first. My parents exchanged a look I recognized from childhood, the one that said I was being difficult. All right, my mother conceded, settling onto the couch. What did you want to discuss? I sat across from them, placing the folder and Nathan's photo on the coffee table between us. I wanted to talk about Nathan's funeral and why you weren't there. My mother's smile tightened. Victoria, we've been through this. We had a prior commitment, wedding dress shopping, I said flatly. A special mother-daughter experience with your sister, my father corrected, as if the terminology made it more acceptable. I picked up Nathan's photo and held it so they could see it clearly. This is your grandson. This is Nathan. The Nathan whose funeral you skipped to go shopping. The Nathan you called disposable. The Nathan whose death you said didn't matter because babies die all the time. My parents glanced at the photo uncomfortably but said nothing. I've been thinking about this a lot, I continued, opening my folder, trying to understand if this was an isolated incident or part of a larger pattern. I think the evidence speaks for itself. I handed them a timeline I had created, documenting years of favoritism toward Melissa and dismissal of me. Birthdays forgotten because they coincided with Melissa's events. My college graduation dinner cut short because Melissa had a crisis. The financial support they had given Melissa compared to what they had offered me. What is this supposed to be? My father asked, looking at the papers with confusion. It's a record of your choices, I replied. A pattern that culminated in the most painful day of my life, when I buried my son alone while you celebrated with Melissa. You weren't alone, my mother protested. James was there, and his parents, yes, they were. Thank God for them. But my parents, Nathan's grandparents, chose shopping over his funeral and then lied to the family about why. My father's face reddened. We didn't think it would look good. No, it wouldn't look good, I agreed. Because it wasn't good. It was cruel. It was selfish. It was the clearest possible statement of your priorities. I pulled out my phone and showed them screenshots I had saved from Melissa's social media. Photos of her trying on wedding dresses while Nathan's funeral was taking place. My mother laughing with the sales associate while I was listening to the pastor speak over my son's casket. Do you have any idea what it felt like to see these after the funeral? I asked, my voice finally breaking. To know that not only were you absent, but you were celebrating? My mother's composure cracked. What do you want from us, Victoria? We can't change what happened. No, you can't, but you can acknowledge it. You can stop pretending it was acceptable. You can recognize the pain you caused. We're sorry you were hurt, my father said stiffly. That's not an apology, I pointed out. That's blaming me for being hurt rather than taking responsibility. For your actions, I pulled out the letter I had written, my final piece of preparation. I don't want you to say anything right now. I want you to listen. This is what I need you to hear. I unfolded the paper and began reading. Dear Mom and Dad, I'm writing this because I need you to understand what your choices have meant to me and to Nathan's memory. When Nathan died, my world ended. Everything I believed about love, about family, about what mattered most was shattered in an instant. The only thing that could have made that pain worse was facing it alone. And that's exactly what your choice forced me to do when you told me that babies die all the time and that Melissa's dress shopping mattered more. You didn't just miss a funeral. You invalidated Nathan's entire existence. You told me that my child, your grandson, was replaceable, unimportant, a minor inconvenience compared to wedding preparations. This wasn't an isolated incident. It was the culmination of a lifetime of being treated as less important than Melissa. Every birthday you forgot, every achievement you dismissed, every time you chose her needs over mine, it all led to this moment when you chose her happiness over honoring your grandson's death. I'm not writing this to hurt you or to extract an apology you don't mean. I'm writing because I need you to know that I see the truth now. I understand that this will never change because you don't want it to change. And knowing that, I need to protect myself and Nathan's memory from further harm, I've decided to step back from our relationship, not permanently, but until you can acknowledge what happened without excuses or deflections, until you can take responsibility for the pain you've caused, until you can commit to treating me as an equal member of this family rather than as Melissa's lesser sister. Nathan deserved grandparents who valued his life and honored his death. Since you couldn't provide that, I'll make sure his memory is protected by people who understand what love actually means, with both sadness and determination. Victoria, when I finished reading, I looked up to see my mother crying silently, her mascara running down her cheeks. My father sat rigid, his jaw clenched, but his eyes showed something I rarely saw: uncertainty. You can't be serious, he finally said, cutting us off over one event. It wasn't one event, I replied firmly. It was the final event in a lifetime of events. And I'm not cutting you off permanently. I'm protecting myself until you can acknowledge reality and commit to change. This is ridiculous, my father insisted. All families have dynamics. We've always done our best, Robert, my mother interrupted, her voice sharp. She was looking at Nathan's photo on the table, really looking at it for perhaps the first time. Stop, the room fell silent. My mother reached for the photo with trembling hands. He had your eyes, she said quietly. Yes, I replied. He did. I never really looked at him, my mother admitted, her voice barely audible. I was always so focused on Melissa's wedding plans, on the dress shopping, on making everything perfect for her. My father shifted uncomfortably. Margaret, don't let Victoria manipulate you. She's upset and not thinking clearly. No, I said firmly. I'm thinking more clearly than I ever have. This is my line in the sand. I stood, gathering my folder and Nathan's photo. I've said what I came to say. The choice is yours now. Acknowledge what happened and commit to change, or continue pretending it was acceptable. Either way, I know where I stand. As I turned to leave, my mother called out, Victoria, wait. I paused at the doorway but didn't turn around. I need time to think about what you've said, she continued, her voice thick with tears. About Nathan, about everything. My father remained silent, his face a mask of stubborn denial. Take all the time you need, I replied without looking back. I'll be here when you're ready to have an honest conversation. I walked out of that house feeling lighter than I had in months. Not because the confrontation had gone perfectly, it hadn't, but because I had finally spoken my truth without apology or compromise. James was waiting in the car, and one look at my face told him everything he needed to know. He pulled me into his arms as I cried, not the desperate sobs of grief I had been crying for weeks, but tears of release, of finally setting down a burden I had carried my entire life. Over the following months, my parents and I had no contact. Melissa tried to intervene several times, calling to tell me I was being unreasonable and dramatic. "They're our parents," she would say. "You can't just cut them off." But I had learned that loving someone didn't mean accepting their mistreatment. James and I continued grief counseling, working through our loss while also addressing the generational patterns I needed to break. We talked about having another child someday, but also about creating the kind of family where every member mattered equally. 6 months after our confrontation, my mother called, not to make excuses or defend their actions, but to say 5 words I had waited my entire life to hear: "I was wrong. I'm sorry." The conversation that followed was the first honest discussion we had ever had about the family dynamics that had shaped my childhood. She admitted to the years of favoritism, acknowledged the pain she had caused, and most importantly, recognized that missing Nathan's funeral wasn't just about choosing Melissa over me, it was about failing to honor the life and death of her grandson. My father took longer to come around. It wasn't until Nathan's first birthday, the day that would have been his first birthday, that he showed up at our door unannounced, holding a small potted tree for Nathan's garden. He said simply, I thought he should have something." Growing in his memory, we planted the tree together in our backyard, and as we knelt in the dirt, my father finally spoke the words I had needed to hear. "I failed him. I failed you. I'm sorry." The path to rebuilding our relationship wasn't easy or quick. It required continued honest conversations, established boundaries, and a commitment from my parents to treat me as an equal member of the family. There were setbacks and moments when old patterns tried to reassert themselves, but the foundation had shifted permanently. Melissa struggled the most with the changes. She had benefited from being the favored child and didn't appreciate having to share attention and consideration equally. But over time, even she began to understand that healthy family dynamics benefited everyone. 2 years after Nathan's death, James and I welcomed our daughter Emma. When I called to tell my parents, my mother's first words were, "How are you feeling? What do you need from us?" Not a casual congratulations followed by immediate deflection to other topics, but genuine concern for my well-being. My parents were present for Emma's birth, her baptism, her first birthday, and every milestone that mattered to us. They had learned, finally, what it meant to be grandparents who showed up. Nathan's memory remained central to our family. We celebrated his birthday each year, shared stories about the brief but precious time we had with him, and made sure Emma knew about the big brother she would never meet but who had changed all of our lives forever. Standing by Nathan's grave on the 5th anniversary of his death, surrounded by both sets of grandparents and holding Emma's hand, I felt something I had never expected: gratitude, not for the pain or the loss, but for the clarity it had brought. Nathan's death had shown me who in my life truly understood what love meant, and his brief existence had taught me to demand nothing less. The tiny blue casket that had broken my heart had also broken open a family system that had been suffocating me my entire life. In demanding that Nathan's life and death be honored, I had finally learned to honor my own worth. My son had lived for only 4 months, but his impact would last forever. He had taught his grandparents what really mattered. He had shown his parents the depths of love they were capable of, and he had given his mother the courage to finally demand the respect and consideration she deserved. Some might say it's tragic that it took such a profound loss to create these changes, but I choose to see it as Nathan's final gift to our family: the transformation of pain into purpose, of grief into growth, of a broken family dynamic into something whole and healthy. Nathan couldn't stay with us, but his legacy lives on in every boundary I maintain, every honest conversation we have, and every moment his sister feels unconditionally loved and valued. He had been my teacher, my catalyst, and my greatest love, all in the space of 4 perfect months, and that, I finally understood, was enough to change everything.